So it seems that we've got the first major Astra Militarum rules teaser of the week, and it looks like the generic guard infantry squads and command squads are going away, being replaced by regiment-specific kits. Could be some bad news like the loss of mixed-in heavy weapons in those units. That does also mean that we might be able to spam heavy weapon teams to Kingdom Come, maybe 27 of them within one army. Let's talk about that and some other guard news with a confirmed price for the Deathcore Krieg box set and a few other hints and teasers. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Astra Militarum, and as mentioned, getting into the first major rules preview of the week. This week's going to be a big one for the collectors for the Hammer of the Emperor. We've got the Deathcore Krieg army set release, the big launch box for the Astra Militarum, and it contains most of the new Deathcore, only the heavy weapon teams and Commissar Command Squad being saved for the actual full codex release, and most importantly rules-wise for the Imperial Guard, the full codex contained within. So it means that we shall get a whole bunch of rules teasers and previews, and hopefully 4 rules revealed on the Saturday. It looks like confirmed pricing on the Deathcore Krieg box set will be $230 or $280 Canadian, and that does mean that it seems to be perfectly in line with the Blood Angels box set, so that should roughly equate to £145 or €185 or thereabouts, definitely in that sort of price bracket. And I think that was what most people were expecting, judging by the contents of the box and the fact that it's a Games Workshop launch box release. As ever, if you were looking to pick up the box set this week, feel free to check out the discount retailers down in the video description. Always better to save money versus Games Workshop on these big box sets, as it can add up to quite a bit. Supply can be a little bit variable. We don't know if this will be one of the ones that Games Workshop sells out of or not, but often even if they've not sold out of the box set from their web store straight away, supplies to discount retailers have often been kind of limited and gone very fast unless you were early. Here's a list of the times when the Krieg box goes live from Friday night through to Saturday morning. For Fenris Workshop in Canada and Wargame Portal in the USA, it's midnight Eastern Time. For Element Games here in the UK, it's 10 AM. For Tash and Galdeep in the EU, it's 11 AM. And then in Gap Games in Australia, it's midday Australia Eastern Time. If you do happen to use any of those links when picking up the box set, it does support Auspex Tactics a little bit as well. Though of course the affiliate links don't cost people any extra to use themselves. Today though, it's not really the box set that we're focusing on. I wanted to talk about the First Guard rules preview. And it seems that this one is Games Workshop setting the expectation for the new way that infantry squads, heavy weapon teams and command squads will work in the new book. In Guard codexes in the past, there didn't used to be any datasheets that worked particularly differently for any one given regiment, though in 9th edition that shifted to a bit more of a hybrid one with both generic options and specific datasheets for the individual regiment things, say like individual ones for Deathcore of Krieg and the Cadian Shock Troops, but now it looks like Games Workshop's fully moving to the new state of affairs. So infantry squads, heavy weapon teams and command squads will all have 3 different datasheets based on Kazachan's Cadians and Deathcore. Interestingly, in the article they bill them as 3 of the most famous regiments. I guess they're just the ones that they have an actual plastic range for. I do kind of hope that Games Workshop might have one more edition worth of Guard major releases for them, given that we've basically had the Cadians redone in 9th, the Deathcore redone in 10th, and the Kazachan kits that needed updates over a decade ago still haven't had their update. It would be nice to see them redone in style at some stage. In any case, as a result, it means that the generic platoon infantry command squad datasheets will basically be removed, which is kind of interesting as it kind of has a negative effect on infantry squads, maybe a sort of side grade for command squads. That means we actually get one more datasheet than we might have expected for the heavy weapon teams. That suggests basically using your guard infantry as one of the 3 different versions. Say for example, if you had Mordians, then just choosing which one represents their style the best. Though I think in reality for a whole bunch of guard collectors, myself included, I just tended to run my Cadian models as the different datasheets anyway, just equip them with the right war gear and make sure that you can tell the squads apart. And then you can both use all the datasheets and also have your army have a cohesive theme, which I personally prefer a little bit better rather than a big mix of different models with very different aesthetics. Probably the single biggest deal for this one though, is that it might well be the final death knell of infantry teams being able to mix in one heavy weapon team within their units. That's something that you've been able to do since the very early days of Warhammer 40k, trade 2 guys out and have them mounted on one base together, give them a big gun, and you can have that embedded within the unit. I did feel that at some point that might be at risk of disappearing, given that Games Workshop really seems to have been driving towards individual box sets represent individual units without upgrades or mixing and matching where possible. But feels like they didn't remove it as quickly as they might have, just given how ingrained that is to how people have been able to construct their armies for a long time. Given that the only place that you could do that was the generic infantry squad, and you couldn't do it in the Cadian Shock Troops, Kazachan Jungle Fighters, or Deathcore Krieg datasheets, my guess is that they probably won't gain a new heavy weapon option within those units, and this will be an option that's sent to Legends. Could be really quite annoying for guard armies that have set up their infantry squads with weapon teams like that, and could be a bit unhelpful from a gameplay point of view if you say wanted some embedded las cannons in a big horde infantry unit, or having something like a lone mortar which has been useful for fields of fire in 10th edition. It also means that for the infantry units you won't have the generic option that can gain the gain cover special rule, though it looks like that's instead been moved to the Cadian command squad. Otherwise, for the other two variants, I guess for the command squads we lose the generic one but gain a new datasheet for the Kaschan command squad. It seems that all of those units will now only be able to lead their counterpart infantry squad, so the Kaschan command squad goes with the Kaschan jungle fighters, Cadians with Cadians and Deathcore with Deathcore. And it does also seem likely that they wouldn't be able to take a heavy weapon in the squad, as you can do that with the platoon command squad at the moment, but not with the Cadian one. Finally, in terms of rules gained, the split in the heavy weapon squad might be broadly a positive for amount of choice. Previously, the Cadian and Kaschan ones were represented by the same datasheet, and now it's split. It both means that you'll have the option of two different special rules to choose from, and also you will be able to spam absolutely loads of them if desired. You could have 27 big guns on the board, so it still sounds like you're probably going to be able to put the vast majority of your heavy weapon teams on the table if you want to, even if not seeded within infantry units. Bear in mind that the heavy weapon changes aren't 100% confirmed yet. We haven't actually seen the full datasheets, but to me it does seem odds on that mixed heavy weapons in infantry units might well go away. Otherwise, besides options removed, Games Workshop also gave us teasers as to the new special rules for the heavy weapon squads and command squad variants, one each for Cadians, Kaschans and Deathcore. Starting with the heavy weapon teams, it looks like the Cadian one keeps the current heavy weapon team special rule, the one where you get to overwatch on a 5+, or a 4+ if they're within a 6 inches of platoon units, so that pretty well equates to 1 command point for fire normally near enough. The problem with this rule was that it was just a bit borderline worth due to needing to expend the command point and target that command point at overwatching with a 50-point unit. Occasionally it could be worth it if, say, one successful las cannon wound could literally be the difference between a bigger scary enemy vehicle being able to attack or not, but often just for overwatch damage purposes you might still be better off overwatching with, say, a lethal hits rogue or dawn tank, or something that's very efficient with overwatch like a hellhound instead, rather than spending 1 command point for 3 heavy weapons hitting on a 4+. If anything, for the generic heavy weapon squads, it looks like the Kaschans could be kind of interesting. It looks like Kaschan las cannon heavy weapon teams just went up in the world, as their new special rule is called Bring It Down, one of the old orders, and it means that when they target monster or vehicle units they get 2 reroll hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of 1. I feel like that genuinely does make them really quite threatening in terms of their damage profile, as they were already at least fairly good with that, basically because they're not really paying for much defense. If they do stay at 50 points, that would mean a Kaschan las cannon weapon team with no further buffs would average something like 5 wounds turn on turn against a toughness 10 3+ save vehicle out in the open, assuming they're either static or getting a +1 ballistic skill order and on the move. That does seem at least fairly intimidating on paper if the opponent doesn't have units that can reach out and shoot them down. As rules go, it feels like it would be far less good on basically any of the other heavy weapon team options though. None of the rest are really all that threatening against the majority of monsters and vehicles. They'll all have to wound standard battle tanks on a 5+ or worse, so it basically just feels like a focal buff for the las cannon ones really, and neither this nor the Cadian one seems particularly helpful if you want to field mortars. Finally, we've got the new Deathcore heavy weapon squad, and as they'd teased in a previous preview, it seems their special rule is Final Duty, the ability to fire on death when they're slain on a 3+, kind of in a similar sort of way to Space Marine Hellblasters. This one does feel like it's a genuinely good rule for heavy weapon teams, as they're kind of famously easy to shoot down. The Krieg ones only have 1 crewman. I don't know whether or not that might make any difference between them having 2 wounds still or not, but overall that does feel like quite a good rule. Hopefully get the alpha strike on the enemy, and then if they do get shot down, at least they get another round of shooting in, and provided their points cost is cheap enough, that could be enough to justify them. If there's only like 1 shot coming at them as well, I guess you'd probably still be able to use that fire coordinator as a bullet catcher to save the life of a heavy weapon team. I suppose then they'd lose that rule, so you'd have to weigh it up as to whether you take down the heavy weapons or the fire coordinator first. Otherwise, from the previews, we know that their flamer option was teased to be strength 5, AP 1 and damage 2. If that does wind up being D6 shots, that does seem like a fairly brutal profile to have on the mid-board objectives, particularly with fire on death. And as teased from the models, the only 2 other options that they'll get are this twin heavy stubber loadout that you can see here, plus a las cannon. I can't help but think that the las cannon or the flamer will be the ones to go for over the stubber, unless it has a very funky profile upgunned from what regular heavy stubbers do normally. It does feel at least kind of interesting to think that you could get 27 heavy weapon teams on the board, maybe 27 las cannons for under 500 points. I feel like in the past they've occasionally been the sort of unit where you might get some more returns with more of them if the opponent can, say, deal with a certain amount in a turn, but maybe not all of them. You could get a pretty serious amount of alpha striking on the go, I guess. I strongly suspect that won't work out as a particularly good thing to do, but still kind of funny to think about the possibility. Otherwise, beyond the heavy weapon teams, there's also the command squad special rules as well. As mentioned, it looks like they've done a bit of a switch around for the Cadian command squad. Their previous Cadia stands rule meant that the squad got to ignore modifiers, so they didn't care about stealth and things. That's been changed around though, so now they get the old infantry squad special rule, the one where you always get the benefit of cover if you're on an objective marker. I feel like that's handy enough to have, given that guard infantry often tend to be tasked with guarding the objectives against all comers. Might just give them a bit more freedom of positioning and not have to have all of them hiding in cover if you want those saves. And I guess could work quite well with the guard wanting to get onto the objectives anyway for their OC and sticky objectives potentially. Otherwise, for the Kaschan command squad, I guess this one's kind of technically a new unit. Previously it would have had the stratagems when battle shocked special rule aura, which to my mind wasn't really the most interesting of them. Instead that's been swapped out for gaining the assault keyword on your shooting, so you'll be able to advance and shoot with your Kaschans with their las guns and flamers. And that does seem like it synergizes pretty well with their intended battlefield role, being a first rank of troops scouting out towards the enemy and dying on the mid-board objectives. Being able to move a fair bit further is pretty helpful for that, and they could go very, very far with move. They're still often a unit that people tend to get tempted to take them in small numbers though, and maybe go for squads of 10 as opposed to squads of 20, and if Iron Hand Strachan goes away then I feel like he was one of the better draws to running a bigger unit. Finally for the command squad, we've got the Death Corps of Krieg one. This is the one that's led by a commissar and his commissar in training. It seems that they get a slightly altered version of the current platoon command squad special rule called Grim Determination. It means that their unit can still take stratagems even when they're battle shocked, and orders can continue to affect them while they're battle shocked. And that's really quite a useful one, given that if they're in a command squad they'll be getting orders anyway most likely. Previously it didn't have the orders bit, just the stratagem bit, but worked as an aura. I'd probably say that this one's a small upgrade compared with that rule. It'd be interesting to see if there's any other funky special rules for the rest of the unit. I guess that Alchemist model might just be a 6+ feel no pain like the other medics. There's also that Servo Skull miniature as well, which I guess would probably be some sort of once per game special rule. Not entirely sure what that one might be. Finally, they didn't talk about the special rules for the infantry datasheets, though given that they already exist in their current form, I don't think there's any huge reason to think that they'd have changed around the special rules too massively. In current 40k it's maybe the Death Corps and the Kaschans that tend to get played the most. Kaschans to scout towards the mid-board, Death Corps can be a big tanky unit with a marshal with a 5+ feel no pain, and the Cadians maybe tend to get most use as a bodyguard for Ursula Krieg potentially, and it's okay to have one unit for sticky objectives. I guess we'll see where they all land with their new points and things though. Otherwise, beyond the big preview today, there's also been a few other guard things dropping on Warhammer Community. I noticed on the Sunday preview they'd said that there'd be 64 datasheets that are actual full codex ones in addition to the ones for combat patrols. I feel like maybe that adds a little bit more certainty as to which kits are going to be removed or staying. There'll be 64 guard datasheets after this update, but currently we have 61, which does mean that a bunch will be lost. The new ones that we know about are the Rogel Dawn Tank Commander, the Krieg Command Squad and Heavy Weapon Squad, the Death Riders and Lord Marshal Dreer, the Combat Engineers and the Artillery Team, so that basically means that we were expecting to lose 4. It seems that with this big infantry squad switched around though, it doesn't look like that's actually affected datasheet numbers at all. We already knew that the Death Corps Command Squad and the Heavy Weapon Squad would be getting their own datasheets, and besides that we'd lost 2 more with no Platoon Command Squad or no Platoon Infantry Squad, but at the same time we've also gained 2 more as well in the Kaschan specific Heavy Weapon Squad and Command Squad. So overall it doesn't look like the infantry numbers actually changed the datasheet calculation, and with the confirmation of 64 datasheets, it seems most likely that the models that have been removed from production will be the ones that go away, so the Munitorum Servitors, the Regimental Advisors, Iron Hand Strachan and Sergeant Harker. Hopefully the latter 2 might be back in some future Kaschan update though. Otherwise, Games Workshop dropped a lore article on the Krieg earlier today, basically the story of their origin, fanatically overcoming the insurrection on their homeworld to be ridiculously loyal to the Imperium and producing waves of regiments all too happy to lay down their lives for the Emperor. I think that this art is new and has a Rogel Dawn tank fighting alongside. I guess that's not something that we'd seen them with in the past. Otherwise, I noticed they had a combat engineer painting tutorial, a bit of a better look at that little remote mine there. Hopefully that can go off with a bang after it's propelled towards the enemy on those corkscrews. Otherwise, hopefully they'll be following this up with a few more previews later in the week. I'd hope they'll do a big one focusing on the new guard detachments at some point. We've definitely had a few hints for them, but not really all that much. We know the names of them, with a siege regiment that means that you can fire into melee with your entire army, a mechanized assault one for chimeras and Tauroxes, a hammer of the Emperor one focusing around tanks, and one tank can smash straight through ruined walls with a stratagem, and then perhaps a slightly more mysterious recon elements one, based around cover, stealth, and camouflage. I guess that might be somewhat Tanith infantry themed, though I guess could be another general purpose one. In any case though, let me know what you make of the new guard rules. What do you reckon to the changes to the infantry squads, heavy weapons, and command squads? And what sort of infantry forces could you see yourself putting on the table post-update? As mentioned, feel free to check out the affiliate discount retailers linked down in the video description if you're picking up the Krieg box this weekend. And as always, a big thank you to anyone choosing to support the channel that way. I'll certainly be looking forward to covering any other Astra Militarum previews and updates over the week. Hopefully Games Workshop will give us some more good stuff with some previews of the detachments and things. I'll certainly be looking to make a full codex review just as soon as I can when all the news goes live. In any case, a big thank you for listening. Feel free to check out the links down in the video description, including the Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel. That one does get a few advantages, like voting on what sort of videos come next, seeing certain videos early, and entry to the prize giveaways. But otherwise, I'd just like to say an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.